Hi, my name is Mike Truty. I'm a cloud technical curriculum developer for Google Cloud Learning. And this is Dan Sullivan, who's a principal engineer and software architect in his day job. Dan's also the author of the recently published official Google Cloud Certified Associate Cloud Engineer Study Guide. We think there's never been a better time for you all to get Google Cloud certified, and we're here to tell you how to do it using the paths, programs, and tools provided by Google Cloud. There's a whole bushel basket of information we have for you, so let's get started here. I'm going to try to give you an overview of our certification process, and then Dan's going to give you a little bit of a deep dive using the Associate Cloud Engineer certification to help guide you for some strategy on how to get certified with concrete examples. Finally, we're going to point you at a whole bunch of resources and offers we have available here at Cloud Next. So you're here at Next 19, and I know you're as excited as I am about everything getting announced. And we know businesses are moving to Google Cloud Platform to add more value, whether it's in meeting your existing needs or inventing your future. And to support you, Google has created 2 different certification levels, associate and professional. Within these levels, Google offers 1 associate certification and 5 professional certifications. The 2 different levels provide different entry points for engineers with varying degrees of experience. And I'm going to explain that in a little bit more detail in a minute. The different certifications that we offer map to different critical job roles, all contributing in important ways. And we have an associate cloud engineer, a professional cloud architect, a professional data engineer, professional cloud developer, professional network engineer, and our newest certification, the professional security engineer. And we're offering our first public testing for the security engineer certification here at Next. I encourage you all to go to cloud.google.com/certifications and explore. If you remember nothing else from us today, that's probably the best thing for you to take away is that link right there. So why certify? To be sure, there are many reasons to get certified. It's not horrible, and we've heard this from many sources, that becoming Google Cloud certified can increase your earning power. And I can tell you from personal experience on LinkedIn that I get a lot more attention now that I've been cloud certified, so that's pretty nice. Also, since cloud is about moving past traditional IT and unlocking new paradigms of work, we know many businesses are facing a severe shortage of skilled labor. And certifications are a reasonable method organizations use to validate baseline capabilities with the new way of working. Being Google Cloud certified means you've demonstrated the necessary skills to leverage Google technology in a way that can transform businesses. Quoting from IT skills surveys, overall, decision makers reported that certified team members troubleshoot issues and complete projects more quickly and have fewer skills gaps. And here's where we can introduce training. We know training is separate but supportive of certification, and training is absolutely associated with job satisfaction. So this second link, cloud.google.com/training, is where we describe all the different offers that Google has for training along multiple learning paths. The learning paths are each mapped to a different certification. So the learning paths include cloud infrastructure, data and machine learning, application development, and so on. We also offer for training different learning environments to customize the training for whatever you like or need. We have on-demand courses where you can learn online at your own pace wherever you are, or you can get matched with Google Cloud instructors and classroom instruction, which frequently works better for larger groups. But perhaps the most valuable kind of training experience that we have is hands-on training. And for this, we have quick labs, hands-on quests, and labs. Quick labs are easy to work through, guided tours of the capabilities needed to be successful in these job tasks and job roles. So this week here in the Dev Zone, we have a couple of different lab experiences that we'll talk about a little later. I want to dive just a little bit deeper into a question we get asked frequently, which is what is the difference between the associate level certifications and the professional level certifications? And one way we distinguish between them is the associate cloud engineer is a job task-based certification, and the professional level certifications are job role-based, job task versus job role. A job task-based certification is focused on technologies and tools. That's sort of a good spot for people who are trying to find an entry point into cloud or even into GCP. And it's also a great pathway to our professional certifications. And in this case, we can see that for associate cloud engineer, we use verbs like build and deploy and manage, because the job tasks for that associate cloud engineer are usually centered around translating technical requirements into technical details and implementations. And that's different than our professional certification, which adds a couple of different verbs like design, plan, and optimize. And it usually takes many years to acquire the experience necessary with the ambiguities of real-world problems and hands-on work to develop the abilities we look for translating business requirements to technical requirements needed by a professional. That's different than what we consider in the associate level. Now, specifically, to dive a little deeper, there are proven strategies to guide you, whether you're pursuing associate or professional levels. So Dan's going to get into that here.
Thanks, Mike. So, if you've decided you wanted to become certified, probably the biggest hurdle you're going to face is actually passing the certification exam. So I'd like to spend a few minutes and just share some tips and advice for how to prepare for the exam, how to take the exam, and what you should kind of focus on in terms of domains of knowledge and topic areas. Now, I'm going to talk specifically about the cloud engineering exam, but at least half of what I'm going to say applies to any of the exams. And a lot of what I say for the cloud engineer exam also applies for the architect exam as well. So first of all, I want to talk about a study strategy. So if you've just decided you want to get certified and you're wondering what's the first thing I should do, I would say go to the certification page for the certification you're going to take and find the exam guide. Google has done a really good job of developing a one-page summary of what's covered on these certification exams. Now, in the case of the cloud engineering exam, there are 5 high-level areas. And it's things like planning, deploying, securing, the verbs that Mike was talking about. And for each of those domain areas, there are very specific tasks that you as a cloud engineer should know how to do. And they get very specific. For example, how do you expand the CIDR block on a subnet so you have more IP addresses? It's that level of detail that you need to know when you take this test. So if you're not sure, and even if you are sure you're in good shape, I would suggest taking the practice exam. Google has a 20-question practice exam, which is available from the certification page. And they give detailed explanations of why an answer is correct or incorrect. So it's really helpful to identify your weak areas. Oh, and one last thing. If I say nothing else, probably the most important thing is that whatever the tasks are and however familiar you are with certain things, it's important that you actually have hands-on experience. So I would say get into the Cloud Shell, get into the Cloud Console, and do these tasks manually. This is not the kind of an exam that you can pass by just reading a book or reading documentation. Now, if you haven't been in school a while, you haven't taken an exam in a while, you might wonder what it's going to be like. Well, the exams are all online. They are multiple choice, 50 questions. You have 2 hours to take the exam. And one of the nice things is that you can go back. You're not locked out once you submit an answer. So you can mark questions for review, you can go back, read things over. And I find that's really helpful when I take the exams. I kind of blow through the ones I know right away, and the ones I'm going to have to read and think about a little bit, I go back for. And then the key thing about taking the exam is it's really important to read the question carefully. Now, I assume that every word in that question means something. And what I look for, in addition to just understanding what's the question asking, I'm also looking for, are there names of any services or software that I should be paying attention to? And what are the technical requirements? So for example, if I see a word like, or a software like Apache Spark, and then I also see a reference to customer requirement wanting a managed service, I'm immediately going to think of Dataproc, and I'm going to start looking for answers that have those. one of the things I found taking these tests, these various tests, is that when it's like a 4-choice multiple or 4-choice option, I can usually narrow it down pretty quickly to 2 options. So one of those is correct and one of them is a near miss. Now, what I do at that point is I will look and figure out exactly what the difference is between the 2 options, and then go back to the text of the question to figure out what's the distinguishing characteristic and the requirements that's going to help me decide between those 2. So for example, if I've narrowed down the options to a question, say picking a database, and it's going to be either data store or Cloud SQL, I'll go back to the text and I'll look for a requirement that says something about maybe a flexible schema, in which case I'll look at data store, or if I require SQL, then of course I'll look for Cloud SQL. Now, in terms of what you need to know, I think there's sort of 2 levels here. There's stuff that you really need to know in depth, and stuff you need to be familiar with, be able to understand at a higher level. So we'll cover both of those. So with the cloud, as you probably heard over and over again, it's security first. So when you go into that cloud engineer exam, it's really important that you understand identity and access management, or IAM, and networking. You really just have to have that down cold. And for IAM, the key thing to understand is that, the key thing to understand is the roles and the permissions and how those are structured. Now, prior to IAM, Google had something called primitive roles. So if you've seen things like owner, editor, viewer, these very coarse-grained roles, those existed prior to IAM. So did something called access scopes. They're still around. Those are considered in the case of the roles, they're considered primitive roles. And in general, it's best practice not to use those. Best practice to use IAM and use fine-grained permissions and roles when you're implementing your authorization controls. On the networking side of the world, the key things to know are virtual private clouds. You just need to understand what those are, and the component structures within them, like subnets and CIDR blocks, which are used to specify IP address ranges within the subnets. Fire rules are important to know. Also understand different options when you're working with a hybrid cloud. How are you going to connect your on-premise network to the Google Cloud? And so you want to understand things like direct peering and VPN. Also, in terms of things you really need to know in depth, definitely cloud and storage options. Compute and storage options. So with Compute Engine, you almost certainly want to know when to use preemptible machines. You want to understand what is an instance group, what's an instance template, and why do you use them. You want to make sure you understand the role of load balancers and autoscalers. With the App Engine, you want to understand that's a platform as a service, and that there are 2 types or 2 versions of App Engine now. There's one called Standard, which is the one that's been around the longest, and that's basically a language-specific sandbox where you can run your application. And then there's also App Engine Flexible, which allows you to bring your own container, so you have much more control over setting up your runtime environment. Kubernetes is really important, and it's getting even more important. So when you take the cloud engineering exam, make sure you understand both the gcloud and the kube control commands that are used to manage Kubernetes. Also understand kind of the architecture at a high level of Kubernetes and how it works, and understand the idea that services are implemented through deployments, and deployments are implemented within pods, which run on nodes. It's important to know that kind of thing. With regards to cloud functions, those are very short-running pieces of code, and they're really designed for event processing. So if you have a question about a customer uploading an image to cloud storage, or someone dropping a message on a pub sub queue, and you need to do something in response to that, cloud functions might be the right option for that. Now, on the storage side, it's important to understand cloud storage in detail. A topic that comes up over and over again when I'm reading various things about cloud storage is the different kinds of cloud storage with regards to multi-regional, regional, nearline, and cold line. So you want to make sure you understand what all 4 of those categories are, when you would use one versus the other. And also you want to understand the life cycle. So for example, you can go from regional to nearline to cold line, but you can't go from cold line back to regional. Those are the kinds of things, if you have that kind of information in mind, you understand the restrictions on various things, it can help you answer questions more quickly because you can eliminate some of the answer options. Cloud PubSub is a messaging system. So it's important to understand just messaging structure, why it's used with, in microservices and things like that. It's not a complicated topic, but it's definitely worth studying. Stackdriver, like Kubernetes, is becoming more and more important. And Stackdriver actually has three main components. It's a logging service, it has a trace service, and also a debugger. So you want to understand each of those three and how they're different and when you would use each of them. Now, those were the things you really need to understand as a cloud engineer in depth. You also need to understand, at a high level, all of the services that are available in Google Cloud. So while you wouldn't expect a cloud engineer to know how to, say, optimize a data model in a relational database or design a document data store, but you do need to understand when you would use each of those. So for example, if you hear that you need a relational database or SQL is required, you need to know that your SQL options are Cloud SQL, Cloud Spanner, and BigQuery. And then you eliminate, or excuse me, then you can sort of narrow it down from there in terms of your options. If something requires, if you need relational and global transactions, well then you're going to use Cloud Spanner. If you're looking to build a data warehouse or some kind of analytic application and you want SQL for data analysts who like to do ad hoc querying, then BigQuery is the appropriate option there. So just understand, for example, Bigtable, if you're talking about IoT or any application where you need streaming, high volume ingestion, low latency writes, that's a great option for Bigtable. Now you also want to understand some of the services that are used for moving data around, like data flow and data prep, and then also for manipulating some of the data and analyzing data like Dataproc. So Cloud Dataproc is the managed Hadoop Spark service. Cloud Dataflow is Google Cloud's implementation of Apache Beam. It's a sort of a unified platform for both batch and stream processing. Dataprep's more like an ETL tool, which lets you work with your data and kind of prep that for ingestion. Data Lab is used for data analysis, data exploration. And then there are several others like Deployment Manager and Developer Services, which again, you don't need to know in depth, but you just need to understand what they provide and where they fit and how to choose between them. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Mike. There we go.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks.
Okay, so as I mentioned, you can get cloud certified here at Next. You can register online with our certification pages there. We've got testing times listed, and the certification tests will happen across the street over at the Westfield San Francisco Center. And the easiest way to find any of this information I'm about to give you is using the Google Next mobile application or the online app there at cloud.withgoogle Next sessions there. And you search on certification. After you complete your exam, there's some pretty cool swag that you can get. And you get to go into the certification lounge, which is right there. So if you are certified, feel free to go use the certification lounge. Tonight and for the rest of the week, we have hands-on labs over there. Hands-on labs are free labs where you can work through an experience. Tonight we have late night labs with beverages included. We also have over next to the hands-on lab area, spotlight labs, where you can sort of work through a lab with an instructor, and if there's an area that you're having trouble with, sometimes watching an instructor is helpful to see how they work through some of the pieces of the lab. Also tonight, we have 4 sessions of our very popular Cloud Hero Challenge Lab. So that's a lab where you compete to solve problems against the clock and your other competitors for prizes. We're going to have 4 sessions of that, and that's pretty fun. So look for Cloud Hero on your mobile app. Finally, we do have a couple of offers for free. I think is it on here? Yeah, we have a couple of offers for free time on Quick Labs and Coursera. So using those links, you can get access to free Coursera and Quick Labs for a month. That's pretty awesome. If you have any questions about any of this, you can ask the people over by the Spotlight Labs, and they'll kind of give you some pointers. And if there's any time left, I think Dan's going to be around for questions, or I will too, and we'll just kind of stand over here. Thank you.
Great, thanks.